Welcome back to another episode of Leading with Your Gut. I'm your host, Jenna Renee Shellman. I'm so excited. I have Kelley Anne back again on the show. If y'all didn't listen to her like a couple months ago, like please go back and listen to our episode that I think aired in June. And we talked a lot about mental health. And Kelley, honestly, I got a lot of comments about that episode, about how like inspiring it was and how there's so many people who struggle with mental health and how it's just been stigmatized, right? Their whole life. And now they're kind of like feeling like they can actually be vocal about their depression or, you know, anxiety or whatever else they're going through. So I want to first like thank you for talking to me about that because it's so important.
Hand on heart, like that is so nice, and that just makes me feel so good because that is the mission, right? Is to get people feeling more comfortable expressing what they need. Like that is leading with your gut, right? Knowing when you need something and not being scared to ask for it and get it.
And it's when I think about my own mental health journey, it's like I feel like with almost everything in my life, right? Like what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a Black woman, and everything else. I feel like I literally have to unlearn every single thing that I've like learned, right? And I feel like the last 7 years of my life, I've just been unlearning everything that I've learned. But like it's been more so, I would say, the past like couple of years. And the stigma around mental health is like one of them. Like that's been a huge thing that I've been like unraveling and like being okay with and talking about it like a lot more.
I mean, how about the fact that, like, even as a therapist, I had to unlearn that stigma, right? So, because when it came to me getting my own mental health help, right? Because I also had a therapist, I didn't start going to therapy till like a year ago, and I needed it. When we talk about burnout, right? Was we talked about the last time, but I needed it probably 10 years ago. I could have done a whole world of difference. But this whole, it wasn't even so much the stigma about mental health as much as it was just this whole of like you telling yourself that you don't deserve to be taken care of. And I do feel like at the bottom of that, there is like cultural shifts and cultural stigma around mental health, particularly in communities of color. Like that is definitely there. But the other piece was like, I believed in therapy. I was giving it to people, right? But I think also this belief that we as women, that therapy is a luxury or therapy is like this indulgence, like it's like, expensive champagne, like, okay, well, some people get it and some people don't. And this feeling that like if you were tougher, you wouldn't need it. Or if you deserve, like, you only deserve this much of a life, right? This much. And to get therapy is like the biggest thing of indulgence, right? It's like eating chocolates versus a necessity. And so I had to kind of reframe how I even perceived therapy for myself. Like I was giving it to people who were disadvantaged and poorer than me and all those things. But somehow for me, I still felt like, be tougher. Or I felt like you are going to get therapy like that. That just felt like it was something that was just so uncomfortable within myself for those reasons.
I feel like too, therapy has always been for like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like therapy has always kind of been known for just for like white women.
Yes.
Right? Like men can't go to therapy because they need to be tough, and like Black women, like they don't deserve therapy, and women of color don't either. And those are just like unconscious like stigmas that we've kind of just like developed, right? As like a society.
I definitely think so. Well, I think like the origins of therapy, right? When you think of the predominant people who made our therapy, constructs, or what we use when I do therapy, like what therapies I use, right? When you look back at them, like famous people, like nobody really uses Freud that much anymore, but people's idea of what therapy is very much Freudian. Like you lay on a couch, you have this image of this rich upper middle class white woman who's bored, who doesn't have any real problems, which is a myth as well, right? Like wealthy white people need therapy because they do have real problems just like everybody else. But like this idea of like the bored housewife that doesn't know what to do, and so she goes and lays on a couch and talks about her childhood, and it seems like this picture of shallowness, right? Like it's a shallow indulgent, like I said, like it's indulgent and shallow to be on there, and that's who therapy is for. And then to think about like the beginnings of therapy for women was also due to like sexual dysfunction, just not enjoying sex. Like that also was the origins of a lot of women's entrance again, but all of it's tied into this idea of like not being able to advocate for yourself, not being able to speak out. But what got projected to the rest of us is like the bored housewife who doesn't know have any problems, so she makes them up with her therapist. And so we all fight against that discomfort.
Did you ever watch Mad Men?
Oh yes, totally.
And
Loved it.
like, okay, I know Betty Draper's character is like a lot of people kind of hated her character, but like, and I get it, but I actually kind of liked her character because she had to live this like little perfect picture life, right? That's like all she knew. And she was so loyal. Like she was so loyal to it. And then in the first season, she went to therapy, right? And like
Yes.
Dawn like she couldn't tell anybody, it was like so taboo. And she just lay on this couch and her therapist like just wrote things down. And then he would tell her husband and basically just tell her like, yeah, like you're just bored. Like you didn't have another baby. That was it. You
Yes.
didn't have another baby. Right. And I literally I felt bad for her and for her character throughout the whole series, but like I felt so bad for her in that moment of like she just looked so trapped as a woman, right? Doesn't matter if she was
And betrayed.
rich or whatever.
Yeah, and betrayed. Like I feel like yeah, for those watch Mad Men one because it's just a great. But I think
It's
when
so
we
good.
it also showcases how we are kind of conditioned. This is like a little bit of an offshoot of what we're talking about. But like the way we're conditioned to view women. First of all, Betty Draper's character, there's moments where you really dislike her. Like she does some really not great things. But when you go
Absolutely.
beginning, you see her as this woman who's dealing with a philanderer, like a guy who doesn't respect her. Like he's home with her, but he serially cheats, right? And this is not a spoiler alert. Like that's just like the premise of the show. Like the main character is a cheater. He's a disconnected father. He's not present. She's doing all these things alone, and she's been sold this dream of like what marriage should be like, what a woman should be like, what happiness looks like, and you watch it all be a lie. And it's her really mental breakdown and how she changes upon realizing that it's a lie. And she changes in very negative ways. But I feel like we were also socially conditioned to dislike her and see her as a villain and to see the man as this hero who has, he's just misunderstood. It's not his fault he loves to sleep with every, woman that waltzes in.
Absolutely. Yeah, I feel like people definitely hated Don too,
Yeah, oh, yeah.
right? Because he was kind of a piece of shit. but then there are times too where they like I definitely feel like I could see people kind of almost siding with him as like, well, he works hard and he's like the creative director and she's just like a spoiled brat, living in like New Rochelle or whatever they lived, right? But
Yes.
they definitely kind of paint this like Betty's the villain and like Don's not like for some of the time, but
It excuses him. Like I
it
think the thing
does.
is like you dislike Don in different seasons of the show, like for sure, because he did some really terrible things. But I think he also has this like heroes-ish journey, right? Where he's like, okay, he's misunderstood, he's growing and learning, and maybe he'll get something by like the time the show resolves. And you are conditioned to feel bad for him. You don't totally go to complete hate because he's the lead character, right? You wouldn't finish the show if you despised him, right? And you come up with this like mixed feelings of like, well, you make excuses for him. Whereas I feel like her arc was very much like, well, you got what you deserve, Betty. Like that kind of feeling of like if bad things happen, she deserved it somehow. But if bad things happen to the main male character, it's like, well, And that therapy section, you were so right to bring it back to what we were talking about, is such a betrayal. Like it also set it up for the fact that, she didn't get what she needed. She was completely betrayed.
Absolutely. She didn't get what she needed at all, like emotionally, physically, intimately,
Yeah.
nothing. Like the only thing it was just like financially, right? She was like
Yeah.
financially secure and like that was it.
Yeah, she had a sad go of it. And I think people also have that feeling in the background too that therapy isn't it's because it's for like bored housewives. It's not serious, it's not really safe. It's not a place you really explore what's going on with you, right? It's just this thing you do because you're bored and don't know what to do on a Friday. I guess I'll do therapy. And I think somehow that's made it into our lives. Like it's made it our consciousness.
Hmm. Yeah, it is from the outside of someone who is not in the therapy world who just goes to therapy. I can definitely see how like the trajectory of therapy and how it's been now it's like in such a better light than it was when our parents were like kids, right? Like in the 50s. So,
And even
mm.
still, like the trope of like the therapist falling for their patient and all this, like I have seen very few really good television depictions of therapy and what it is. And like
Mm.
ironically, like I would say the best depiction of therapy, I've seen a couple, but the best that comes to the top of mind is Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, which was like a CW show musical. She ends up going to therapy, and I have to say, even though it's like a complete like a show is not serious, it's a comedy, it has the best depiction of what therapy actually looked like. Like it
Oh,
actually
interesting.
therapy.
Huh. Okay. Do you ever listen to the podcast? I think it's canceled now, but it's called The Hilarious World of Depression.
No, but I need to go check it out stat.
It's actually it's really good, and I'm almost positive that they had to cancel, but I don't know if they're like going back on the air. They've been around for like years, but they have an episode, and I'll send it to you. And the episode is like the best like movies that depict like true mental health and like depression, like the ones that actually like depict it really well, and then the ones that like don't. And I found that like so fascinating because I didn't even think about that. How like movies and TVs, like when they do kind of show mental health or therapy, like it doesn't seem, I know everyone has a different experience, everyone has a unique experience, but sometimes it doesn't seem like fully authentic of like what it really is.
Yeah, it rarely is. Like it
Yeah.
rarely is, and some of the stuff is just like it just becomes like annoying because you're seeing the depiction. You're like, okay, this is not remotely how anyone I know or have ever done therapy in my life, but it moves the story along, right? So, and the tropes about the therapist falling in love with their patient. Yes, does that happen? I mean, if you worked in my world, there's very few opportunities that I would see a patient and be like, yeah, there, there's somebody who I really feel like there could be a relationship blooming. Like that is not how therapy works 90% of the time. But that kind of trope as well. And again, it also to me as a woman, it also was really frustrating because that's so demeaning. That's like I can't control myself around an attractive patient. I then would have to sleep with him. I mean, why else did I go
Right.
to school?
Right.
but,
God.
but to find my man on the opposite side of the room. So there's that, but then there's just like unrealistic depictions of it in general, and people buy into that, so that also stops them from getting help, right? If you see
Mm-hmm.
therapy depicted that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Before we press record, I asked you a question. I said, "How are you?" And I've been trying really hard this whole summer to be really cognizant of that question because when I ask that question, I'm fine with people being like, "I'm fucking pissed. I'm angry. I'm sad." Like, I'm kind of trying to get away. Like, if people say I'm good, that's fine. But like when people ask me that now, I'll like try to tell them like truthfully how I am, right? Which
Good.
I feel like is we're normalizing like sharing our real feelings. But we haven't talked in like a couple months. A lot has happened in our country, unfortunately, in a couple months. It's definitely been an emotional toll for me. I can't even like watch the news anymore because it's like too much. So where are you at?
I mean, I think in some ways similar. I have reduced. I got into a practice when I lived overseas. So I lived in Europe for a while, and I've only been back in the States 2 years. It's been a rough 2 years since returning, and I got into this practice of only getting my news from very select sources and really limiting how much I got. Just some of it was just accidental. Like there was no way around it. I didn't have like 6 o'clock news where I was that was American. I'm kind of thankful that I developed that practice because now I don't go news hunting like I used to, right before. And it has been a lifesaver for me because it has been, very just stressful in general. I think, we talked about before 2020 being like this dumpster fire of a year and people having to like really regroup and reflect and really get clear on what's important to them, what's not. And I think that that's still true, but I think people are exhausted. And I think particularly as a Black woman, like we're talking about me, I think, it's been a really tiring year for me. And it's been really it's like can it be 2021 but yet the problems are not, I don't know that that's going to make a difference, right? Like I'm in a hurry to get out of this year like in name only, but it's been really difficult, and but it's also been a learning experience for me to be really clear about what's important, what I want to do. Like I've also got energized to show up more. And I think one of the gifts of 2020, the gift and the curse, is it has been exhausting and it has been like so just draining and sad in so many ways, but it's also been like this igniting, like it ignited me to be present and show up, and in ways that I didn't think I would want to show up or
Mm.
would be present.
Absolutely. I've been saying that 2020 is the year of awakening and it's the year of
Yeah.
exposure. And if you feel like you're not having an awakening in some way, shape, or form, or if you feel like you are not clocking yourself for your accountability, um, regardless of what it is, like you're missing the good part of this year, right? Of so much inner
Yes.
growth that you can have. I saw a tweet the other day that was like, people keep saying they can't wait for 2020 to be over, but y'all, like, I don't think it's going to be different in January 2021. And I was like, oh my God,
So
that's
true.
so true. Like, I really don't think so. We're just so, our country as a whole is just so behind with like, with COVID and with the fight for racial justice, right? Like, it's so, we're just so stagnant in,
Yes. And in some ways regressing, right? Like it's stagnant and then
absolutely.
backwards, right? And I nodded my head like enthusiastically when you said that this year was about awakenings and exposures. Like if you're not awake, you're going to be exposed. Let's just put it that way, right? If you're not getting awake. So I love that, those two words. And agreed. Like we as a country, I think for so many people who had this kind of lived in this bubble of thinking, even people of color, that like we've somehow moved somewhere. Like we've moved the needle, we've gone forward. And then to see how quickly that didn't happen, how quickly we've gone backwards. Is it we've gone backwards, or is we've just kind of exposed, as you said, people are awakened to the fact that people were never really as far along as we thought? And people have been given permission to be outward about where they're not with their individual freedoms and their, thoughts about race and rights and all of those things. Are we really as far along as we thought?
I mean, it's just for me. It's just folks that say that say people of color like they've really advanced. I'm like, you are just holding up like white supremacy, honey. Like that's not
Yes.
as a whole. Like that's not true,
Not at all.
and um, it's been tough when you see more of us getting killed, right? Visibly, right? I mean, we
Yes.
know that this goes on without cameras, but like now that it's more visible for me, I'm recognizing that it's more traumatic for me. The more I see it, and that's why I'm like, I can't even see any of these
No.
videos anymore. I don't even need to see it because I know that it happens. Like, I don't need to be convinced, y'all. I don't.
Right. Agreed 100%. And I tell people, honestly, I tell people for community, particularly for Black people, don't watch them because it's our experience. Like, if you identify as a Black woman or man or however you're identifying, but if your racial identity is Black, that's your lived experience. Like, you know a person, you've heard a story. You don't need to rewatch that and traumatize yourself to the truth. Like you said, you don't need to wake up. No one's convincing you that Black people get killed just by the cops. That is not something you're like, oh really? That I didn't know until that video came into my life that was happening. We already know it to be true. And I really do feel like for 2021, as regards race, this Black Lives Matter movement is really a movement, I've kind of said, is a movement for allyship. It's a movement for white America. It's not really about Black Americans. Like, to me, I think our job is to go heal ourselves and to engage in some radical self-care. Like, my Black Lives Matter protest is going and taking care of myself. Like, my money, my health,
Yay. Yes.
my showing up and being more visible, my imposter syndrome, whatever that is, that's what the movement is about for, I feel, Black Americans. For white Americans, though, I think it's a call that it's like, I haven't known, let's say you're a white person, I haven't known what to do. Oh, I know what to do. I'm going to get on TikTok and tell my uncle he's a racist, right? And at the Thanksgiving dinner, I'm going to call out the people who have been ruining my name. Like, that's not who I am. I'm going to stand up and say that. And so it is a movement. I tell people, like, in battles, people get injured, right? And they have to come off the field. White people are reinforcements for us, right? Like, we have been injured and battered in this battle for racial equality and equity, right? White people, they showed up. Now they're showing up for reinforcements. Like, okay, you go to the tent and get healed in the war zone. I'm going to go stand up and relieve you. And I feel like that's what's been missing, and that's capturing in this moment.
Right. And that's the whole basis of allyship is one, recognizing where you need to be accountable, right? And the
Yes.
things that you have not been accountable for, right? And that takes a lot of inner work. That's a lot of inner work to really be like, oh, here are all the things I have done or have not done. Mostly have not
Yes.
done, right? I would say. And then how am I going to commit to this moving forward? How am I going to support and protect Black people and people of color, right? Can I stand up to
Yes.
my racist uncle, my racist friend? Can I protect this community, not necessarily because it's your boyfriend or your girlfriend or a friend or
Yes.
even a family member, right? It's because you care and you protect and you care about this community and recognize the inequalities and the inequities that have occurred since the start of the United States of America. And so that's, in terms of allyship, like that's literally what I feel like. Maybe I'm being selfish for me saying this. Like I need, right? Like I need more white people to like literally protect me from like microaggressions, even as small as that.
Yes.
Unconscious bias for, throwing their racist uncle underneath the bus. Like instead of making me feel uncomfortable all the time at like, family dinners or barbecues, like them standing
Yes.
up like for me, right? Like I'm kind of tired. Like I
Well, we
like what
are,
you
right?
said. Like, I'm kind of tired. Like, I do my
Right.
own stuff for advocacy, right? But like, I need support. Like,
Right. And
stand
it's
up for me.
reinforcements. And I think that's what's missing, right? I really do see it as like a battle. Like people get relieved in a battle, right? Like they send people in to relieve them so they can still win it, right? You can't still keep being fighting injured, mortally wounded. And I think for so many of us, we are exhausted. And it also brings together, the fact that we are all connected. The issue of race is not a people of color issue. It is a human being issue. And
Bingo.
white people are just as damaged by it as we are in different ways. It shows up differently for sure, but it is a thing that one without the other can't happen. And so it is totally okay to turn to people in this human family, like we're not literally family, but in the human family, and say, I need your help. Like, I need to be protected. I deserve a little protection here. And I feel like if we languaged it better that way, I mean, not that everybody would join in, but that is really what the call is. It's like somebody's hurting and they're asking for your help. Will you show up and help or not? And it really is about showing up. How that looks may be different. Maybe you're a doctor and you can do surgery on someone. Well, in that case, go out and go do all the things, go extreme. Maybe you just hold their hand while the surgeon or 911 comes, right? How that shows up for you in this fight is up to you and in your abilities. Like no one's asking you to topple down Confederate monuments, but if that is you, go for
Go
it.
for it.
But right, I'm not going to tell you not to because I know if I do it, I'm going to get shot. So
There you go. Exactly.
once white people start taking them to monuments, Jenna, they went down. They didn't come back up the next day. Black
Exactly.
people were getting arrested and getting beat down trying to take down those monuments. White people showed up and they're like, oh no, not today. And they toppled it and it's over. And so it's like, but if that is you, wonderful. But if it's the equivalent of holding my hand, which is like doing the work, going on Google and not asking me to explain my blackness to you, right? Going to Google Scholar and then saying, I read this and it really touched me and I want to do more. That could be the equivalent of holding someone's hand. Like it doesn't have to be this pressure on
Yep.
yourself as an ally to do all the things.
Absolutely. And that's actually something that I teach in my workshops is that I think some people think that there's that anti-racism work is all external, right? I got to post all this stuff on social media. I got to go to every single march. I got to put like a Black Lives Matter, sign in my restaurant or whatever, my
Yes.
business. And I got to make a Black Lives Matter DEI statement, but I won't do anything about it.
Right.
Like that is like so external. And so for me, my whole thing is like, it's actually really internal. Like it's really internal. If you can really start to internalize how you were brought up, right? And the spectrum of privilege and oppression, and really understand perspectives of other people, right? That's what true diversity is really acknowledging and respecting people that have different identities than you, right? If you can really get that and really understand how you have not shown up, right? Most likely, because,
Yes.
like I've met a lot of people who are like, I'm not racist. I would never say that. And
Right.
I'm like, I'm sure you wouldn't, but like that is overt versus covert, right? You are still so
Right.
complicit in white supremacy. So, like, you kind of are racist, right?
Right.
That's
You let it,
really just what it is. If you're
yeah.
complicit with all of this, if you're, choosing to keep your eyes closed, then, like, you need to do some inner work, right? And so the second you can really go inward and really take accountability for your actions, that's when it's going to be really clear for you as to like how you can show up for black people and people of color. It won't even be a question. Like you won't even, it'll just be like more natural for you, but you got to do the inner work. The inner work is
Yes.
hard to do.
It's so hard to do. And because race is personal, and that's what I go back to, like it is personal, whether you are a black person, a Latinx person, a native person, or white. It is personal. And that is what is missing here. It's like we've made it this us versus them situation, but it really is. It's a personal journey that everyone goes on. It's realizing the way that you have been privileged and what that means, right? And that's inner work, not like the performative wokeness of like, oh, I do blackout Tuesday, so therefore I'm
Yep.
not racist, right? And it's like people are also, to give some credit, people are also pushed to do that, right? At the expense of the internal work. Like it's like, well, you didn't put Blackout Tuesday up. What kind of person are you? What's the point of putting a black tile up if you don't live the principles or you've never done any self-reflection? And when people do race work, like you, when I've seen people do it and engage with them, it is so, particularly with allyship, it touches on identity and the ways that you have not been standing up for yourself and the way you've been betraying yourself by not speaking up. And people find their voice. And that is the work that you give to people when they do allyship. It's like the ability to call out what is wrong and how it helps them in their lives. Like I've seen women particularly be like, you know what, I don't feel like I have a voice. And it wasn't until I started doing this work that I realized, oh yeah, I need to use my voice for others and then like internal work for myself. Where are the times that I'm not standing up for me, let alone other people of color? And so it's that thread that shows you that race work and diversity work is about you internally more than it even is about, other people.
Yeah, you definitely hit it on. I definitely feel like once people really start doing the inner work, then they will actually start to realize how they need to be allies for other groups, right? That's something that I've
Yes.
learned. That's not like, right, I've always said, I'm an advocate for women because I'm a woman, and I'm an advocate for black people because I'm black, right? And people who
Right.
are biracial because that's my like group. But like,
I
and then
know.
I'll say, yeah, I support, LGBTQ plus, but like I've really checked myself and I'm like, how have I supported this group? Right. and
Agreed.
and that's kind of like my own journey now. Like, how have I supported people who have non-binary genders? How have I really truly
Yes.
supported people of different sexualities? How have I protected them? Have I? Right. So it's like I'm exactly what you said. Everybody is on their own personal journey, right? And you want to advocate for your own group, but you want to be an ally and strive for allyship for other groups that are marginalized, because we're all in this together.
Yes. And if we realize that, how different would the world be, right? And it's the fact that
Mm-hmm.
we don't realize that, like we start pushing and fighting, right? To be like, well, what about me and my group and my stuff? And that's what you realize with this work too, when people try to rush, when we try to center, we talk about not centering in white spaces and centering, giving somebody else the mic, so to speak, right? And letting them have a little bit of the shine. It's like, it's not a competition. It's it's being human and showing up for people who are hurting, right? If you went to
Absolutely.
someone and they were hurting in the hospital, you wouldn't say, oh, but what about my stuff? You wouldn't like the person who goes to someone in ICU and sits next to them and holds their hand and says, but you know what? I struggle with my asthma and I struggle with my this. And I don't really know, like, I see that you're hurt, but can we talk about my stuff right now? No, they're the ones who are in need right now. You step up and you support them. And then somebody else comes in and they're in the ICU. You step up and support them. And I agree with you. Like I've had to check myself for like differently abled people. Like I have never really
Absolutely.
thought about them, to be fair. And I had to acknowledge that about myself. Obviously, and again, same thing other people say. I was not discriminating against people who are differently able, but the lack of insight on my part, shamefully, of not being aware of what it is like to be differently able. And how have I shown up to be like colleagues of mine who couldn't go to conventions and conferences because there was no accommodation for them. How have I not in my whole life been like, that's unacceptable? I want to advocate that we get you to go. Why should you not be able to go to this? Because we can't figure out how to accommodate your issue, your medical condition, or whatever you have. And so like showing up like that LGBTQ plus community as well, like how I haven't done all the time. Like I agree with the tenets of it. And I'm like, yeah, if I see someone saying something terrible, I'm going to speak out. But how have I really shown up outside of this like bare minimum?
And you definitely hit it on the spot too, because I am someone who has invisible disabilities, but not visible disabilities. So, one, kind of like what we were talking about with mental health, is like invisible disabilities can be stigmatized, right? So, I haven't really
Yes.
done much for myself or for other people. And then people who have physical disabilities and who are, discriminated against in this bubble of ableism, like, what have I done? Right? Exactly what you said, right? Like if someone comes and they can't physically do something because of their disability, like have I truly accommodated them? Or have I just been like, right? And
Right.
like that's
That's
that,
sad.
that that's
Right.
the clock that I'm having of like, wow, like I have not truly protected this like group of people at all. Yeah.
No, it's really like as checking yourself. I had just finished reading Brene Brown's Braving the Wilderness, and she has this whole chapter about people are hard to hate close up. Lean in or move in, excuse me, move in. And so what really awakened me to that was that I started working with differently abled coworkers and seeing what it is like for them. Because again, and that's what I try to tell people when they get so defensive about privilege and white privilege, is that it's the same. Privilege is the same thing. You don't realize you have it until you're watching people who don't. And privilege is me never thinking about how wide a door is because I just walk through it. Privilege is me not questioning about like the keyboard on my computer because I can see fine or I can hear. It never occurs to me because I live in a world that is catered to me, right?
I'm literally
that
snapping
is
in the background.
that is privilege. And so if I can acknowledge that, if I have the humility to acknowledge that it never occurred to me. I'm not the devil. I'm not saying I'm a terrible person. But if I can acknowledge that it never occurred to me that other people would have it difficult because they've never experienced it, that is what white privilege is, right? Like it is a privilege based on race that you did not realize, oh, wow, I have things good. I don't realize what it's like to be somebody who doesn't. And that is what privilege enables you to do, to be completely blinded to what you've got going good for you. But once the mask is off, just be like, it's not that you have to say, like, I'm the devil. I don't go around apologizing to differently able people all day long. Like, I'm so sorry and burdening them with my acknowledgement.
Right.
That, oh, sorry, differently abled person. Um, I just realized that I don't know about doors because I can walk through them. Like nobody wants to hear that. But what instead it moves me to do is inner thoughts and show up. Now I'm like, I advocate. Now I don't tolerate when people make like, microaggressions toward differently abled people. Like, well, I don't know if people can understand her. I'm like, why? Because she's differently or he's differently abled, they'll work around it. We are going to bring them in a program. We're going to include them because they have an invisible disability. They may need a challenge on something, right? They may need some help with something. We're not going to leave them behind just because of that. And that's something that I did upon the realization of my privilege as an quote unquote able-bodied person, right? I didn't immediately go to like defensiveness or center myself. Well, I'm a Black woman, so I can't help it. Like I have my own struggles. I don't, you don't know what it's like to be Black. It's not about that.
You hit it right on. You hit it right on. Let's talk about we brought up microaggressions a little bit.
Yes.
I feel like over time microaggressions can take a toll on someone's mental health. Is that
Absolutely.
something that you found in your practice, regardless of what their identity is? But is that something that you found in your practice? And have you noticed that more, like people sharing different microaggressions that they get?
Yes, I think microaggressions have kind of been centered a little bit more for people to talk about. But I think the other thing it's microaggressions, but it's not even just microaggressions. It's microaggressions combined with gaslighting.
Oh
Like
God,
it's
yeah, yeah.
right? that's what the distress is. It's like everybody has bad things happen to them, right? And that takes a toll on you. But what makes a really bad thing worse is when people deny it's actually happening. And that is what microaggressions allow people to do. They allow you to be gaslit on top of, so like when people are gaslighting you, they're telling you, you're looking in your eyes, seeing it's happening and saying, no, that's not the case. And so as I think even as a Black woman who's experienced microaggressions, you're just taught to minimize it. And what does it do? Like, you talk about this whole concept of being authentic and listening to your inner self. But what happens to you when people constantly tell you that's not it? Like, that's not what you're thinking. That's not what you're feeling. You're making that up. It's like we just push it to the side. And so I never really thought about microaggressions in my life until maybe like 2 years ago. Not because I didn't know I was being discriminated against or things were happening, but it was like, why am I bringing this up, right? It's not a big deal. All the lighting things, right? Not a big deal. I'm making it more than it is. Am I sensitive? You got to go along to get along. And so I didn't really address them because, that was just the way life was. And so I feel like for now, people are now they're languaging it better, and they're knowing what it means and calling it out a little bit more. I still think we have a long way to go, though.
We have a long, long, long way to go. I was telling somebody the other day that it was one of my old coworkers. I was telling her this, and one of my bosses that I had at a previous job, I was really stressed out because I had so much on my plate. Like, I literally had a job that was like, it was just too much. And so I went to him and I was really honest, and I was like, I need some more support. Like, there's too much on my plate. I'm really stressed out. Like, I'm breaking down. And he flat out was like, Jenna, I have to like laugh at it now. He's like, Jenna, stress is made up, and stress comes from your head, and you're not feeling stressed. It's something that your ego is telling you, and you can do this. You can do all of this, and it'll be fine. And that was like, and when he said, this was years ago, and when he said that, I didn't know like what gaslighting was, right? I didn't know that term, but I just knew like the feeling that I had of like, I literally just did the most vulnerable thing, and I went to you and told you that I'm struggling and that I need more support because I care about this business, right? And you did nothing. Like, you literally just told me that everything I was experiencing was in my head.
No, he did more than nothing, because he then proceeded to tell you, like, you've made it all up and you do not have a real problem. Have a nice day. Like,
exactly.
Like, insert Viola Davis, meme of her grabbing her bag and leaving. That's the only thing I can think of when I heard that story. Like, let me get my bag. I side-eyed so hard. I'm like, and I'm out. Like, this is ridiculous. But that is what happens.
That's one of my favorite gifts, by the way, of Viola Davis.
It's like, there's two by her. It's that one, and there's another one where she's just rocking in her chair disgusted. And I was like, yes, that is Viola Davis. Why do you know my soul so well with your face and your movements? Like, that is exactly how that whole moment felt to me. And it's like, I do advocacy work. I've done advocacy work before for women who are abused. And I was advocating for myself at a meeting, and someone told me, Kelley, you're acting like one of your victims right now. And I thought to myself, because I've been victimized, you are victimizing me. And I literally had to tell the person, like, yes, if I don't advocate for myself, how am I going to advocate for other people? And I say that to say that, like, people are so entrenched in their own beliefs that the first reaction you have is to just invalidate somebody else's, because it's like, ouch, that's a little too close, right? Like, this guy was like, oh no, if Jenna can't do it, I guess I'll have to do it, or I'll have to figure out a problem. So it's better to just, ouch, that's too close to home, or maybe I failed Jenna. Like, even to give him the most generous estimate, it could be that he literally looked at you and was like, oh my gosh, I've broken somebody, right? Like, I pushed them to a breaking point. That's not who I am. And instead of holding that thought and doing something different, it was like, let me repel it and say to Jenna, oh, it's all in your head, which is such a sexist thing, by the way. And so
it is totally sexist.
Her head. How invalidating. And it's infuriating to be told that it's like, oh, that's in your head. That's adorable. Not real.
Yeah. It kind of, after I was really infuriated by what he said, then what I did was I just like tried to work harder.
Yeah.
right? Because it was like, well, I guess as a woman and as a Black woman, I guess I have to prove myself even more. Like it was that like type of reinforcement of
Yeah.
like, I guess I just got to keep proving myself. Like, and that in that particular job, I think I said this in our last interview, but I was so burnt out by that situation. Like, yes, it was a lot of work. There was a lot of workload on to me that was a huge burnout issue. But like, literally, Kelley, like emotionally, I was so burnt out by shit like that.
Yeah.
By
Because
shit
it
like that.
is.
So toxic.
Yes. Yes. And it's like we create permission for people to not show up for themselves. Like that was a cruel act to both you primarily, let's be very clear, to you primarily, but also to that man. Because that deprived him of showing up as a human being with fellow feeling as a good leader. Like he robbed himself of an opportunity. And trust me, I'm not crying for him. You are truly
I'm not
the
either.
person who was that is impacted and victimized there. So let me not try to say it's 50-50. Like, oh, he hurt too, Jenna. I'm not saying that. But I'm also saying like how it wounds and damages people, right? Like it damages both the person who inflicts that kind of nonsense on you and it damages you doubly. And so he failed to show up and be a better leader and be a better human and be a better man, right? He just totally said, I'm sidestepping this. This isn't my problem. And it cost him. But it costs you more, right? It costs you double. And so to be clear about that distinction, but that's what I want to show people when they get so defensive. Like you are losing out on your own development, man. Like you are a jackass and you are not going to go anywhere with your life in the long term and meaningful. Like you're going to be one of those people that's lonely crying somewhere someday because you don't show up. But like to do that to you is so cruel. And as a fellow Black woman, also to have to be indulged. And I know you've probably experienced some of this too. Like also by not having, there's this weird dynamic that happens to Black women who don't fit, this African look of Blackness and how people in corporate white America use them. Like they prop them up as favorites because you don't look super Black, so that's cool, right? And I'm using finger quotes here when I say look Black, because what does that even mean?
Total tokenism.
But it's like, somebody called me like Sally Hemings at a job as a joke to illustrate like what happens, right? That you get pulled proximal, like you're next to power, but you are abused in that position. You are treated in a certain way. And like you got to this place and then they feel like they own you. Like, well, I've helped you get to where you are. So you should just try more. Stress isn't a real thing. Because you could be like the rest of the people out in like the plantation of life doing the other stuff, and I brought you in, so you should be grateful. So stress isn't a real thing, Jenna. Like let's just go there. Let me mentor you. And then they call it mentorship, which sends me to another place when they tell you they're trying to mentor you. Like I've been told, I'm trying to give you feedback and I'm trying to mentor you. I'm like, that is not mentorship. That's abuse.
Absolutely. And it's manipulation, which is abuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then, but they do that with this like story they tell themselves of like, but you got to be in the room. Like, how dare you come to me, Jenna, and say that you're stressed because you're in the room. And you know how many women of color get to be in the room? And you're here and you're going to tell me about the stress business? No, stress is in your head. Have a nice day.
That's why I left. Like,
snaps to you. I'm snapping now.
Yeah.
Because nobody needs that in their life.
No. No. I like what you said earlier about humility, because when I think about leadership, and I've been in leadership for a long time, right? As a teacher and then as a manager, and I was not perfect at all. Like I look back and I'm like, God damn, like I could have been so much better in so many ways, right? Like I think for the most part, I think I did pretty well. But like if I could do it over again, like for anything, right? Being a classroom teacher or manager, whatever, I would do it so differently, right?
Yes.
And I acknowledge that, right? Like I fully acknowledge that. So there are some listeners here that are like, Jenna, you're the worst manager ever. But one of the biggest things that I've learned about being in a leadership role is that like the number one trait I feel like leaders need to have, and a lot of leaders have a hard time with this, is that you have to have humility.
Yes.
Like you have to, that is the number one trait. And the second one I would say would be empathy, but I feel like those two are really tied together.
Yeah, they are.
If you can't say, I hear you, I see you, I want to help you. I acknowledge that you're stressed. I acknowledge your pain. Or like, I was wrong. Like, I wronged you. That was
Yes.
something like, or we need to do better, right? Like, a lot of leaders right now with DEI, like, they're kind of coming in their own awareness of like, wow, we really need to do better, like that type of
Yeah.
humility. Those are the two. That's the number one trait for me. I would say, and empathy is the second. But if you don't have that, or if you're really scared of that because you've probably been taught all your whole life not to have those traits as a leader, right?
Yep.
Which I've seen, then the road for you as a leader is going to be so hard. And internally, I feel like internally it's going to be hard for you too, because how can someone, keep telling someone, oh, I know that you're really stressed, but like, I'm not going to help you. Like, how, unless you're like a psychopath, like maybe my boss was a
Right.
psychopath, but like, how, like, don't you feel like you would internally just like start to cripple apart?
Yes, and I think that's exactly what happens. And I tell people, in this kind of work of showing up and working with people, which is what most people do these days, right? They work with other humans. You need bravery, you need humility and bravery. And I think those two things are linked to me because you
Absolutely.
have to be humble to acknowledge you made a mistake. And you also have to be brave enough to say it out loud, right? Because it takes a little bit of courage to be like, yeah, hold up, I was totally wrong. I did that wrong. I need to learn better. I need to do better. And then it's like you also have to be humble enough to realize that you're not the know-it-all. You don't have all the answers. You're going to make mistakes. You also have to be brave to acknowledge that you're going to make mistakes and brave to put yourself out there to do the right thing and to try something different, and then brave to acknowledge it didn't work. And so they kind of work so closely together, bravery and humility, to like show up. And true leaders have both, right? They're brave when it calls for. They step up and accept mistakes because it's their leadership that got us there. Even when it's like maybe a team member, oh no, but I co-signed it, so I'm taking it. I'm going to step up and accept mistakes. I'm going to do the thing that's not popular or go against the grain, but is the right thing to do or the best thing to do. I'm going to say it out loud. And then I'm going to be humble if it falls apart on this experiment that we just did. And I'm going to own it and just do those things. And people don't really do that. But when it is done, so much good gets accomplished. No matter what the team is, no matter what they're doing, so much gets it done when you have those two.
Mm, absolutely. You nailed it. You nailed it. Like always. What is going on with you? What's the news? What's the tea? What's
What's the
going on?
tea,
What's
right?
going on with Let's Burn Bright?
I mean, I hope to announce an engagement to Shamar Moore, but alas, that has not happened. So I'm going to have to just come up with other things to do as I chuck all my feminist rhetoric out the window and be like, but I got engaged to a man, y'all. No, I'm totally kidding. So two things I'm kind of working on now is like I still have my podcast, which is Burn Bright, which helps particularly women with self-care and taking care of themselves. I'm about to revamp for season 2, which I hope will be a lot more of this kind of energy and this kind of discourse, because I really want to get into these topics too. And then the second thing that I'm doing that I'm really excited about is I'm hosting a virtual summit particularly for Black women and celebrating their success. And so it is the Successful Black Women Summit, and it is themed, release the hustle, embrace the happy, because I feel like as Black women, we have been taught a very narrow, women in general, but this is particularly for Black women, we've been taught a very narrow definition of what success is. And it's at the expense of self-care. It's at the expense of physical wellness. It's at the expense of abundance mindset versus get your money and get your bag, that very narrow definition. And so this summit is all about that. It is one day in October 17th, and it is all about having that really redefined and broadened. And it's all Black women that are speaking, that are doing the panels, that are educating other Black women on ways to expand what it means to be successful. And so for me, that's been like a project, a labor of love to bring to the fore. And so I've been working on that behind the scenes to get that out on October 17th.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. One, can I attend as a guest?
Absolutely. And it's
Okay.
completely, you like, we need to talk about you even being a part of it. But in
I
general,
would love to.
I know. And
I would
this
love to.
conversation is the kind of thing we need to like have televised and put out there. But it's free for everyone to attend. Like if you identify as a Black woman and you identify with that successful Black woman team or term, excuse me, then it's free to register. And the registration's up right now at 2020.successfulblackwomen.com. But it is going to be fun. We have 18 different speakers, there's different tracks, all kinds of things. From like nonprofit stuff to transformation to personal branding, whether you do a 9 to 5 job, like how you need to do your own personal brand, which I was like, oh, I need to get my whole life together on that, or how to do like a side hustle, quote unquote, without guilt, how to do side work, how to balance. The art of self-care is going to be discussed, salary negotiation tactics, how to get outside more and get in tune with nature as part of your physical wellness, nutrition. All of that's going to be encompassed in this one day.
That's awesome. I would love to help you promote that too. So, as you are, I mean, we're promoting it here on the show, but on social media, I definitely want to help you promote that so you can get
Yes,
people
you're
to
all in.
attend.
Like, I need a Leaning with Your Gut sponsorship of
Yes.
like saying it like you're part of it because you talk so much about these issues. And we're going to have a panel on like the state of Black women. Like, it's like our State of the Union and opportunities and challenges, and have a panel of different experts talking about what it's like to be a woman and a Black woman in 2020. What are the great opportunities that we've kind of talked about, like the awakenings, and what are kind of the things that continue to be a challenge for us? And that's going to be also centered in the summit.
That's amazing. Well, I will definitely have all the information in the show notes. And like I said, as the event comes up, Kelley, I'm so happy to help you promote this and
Yeah.
to get it out there because I think it's really, really important. So I love, 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 love what you're doing. Anything else that's going on that needs to be mentioned?
Well, you can always find me on Instagram. I mean, I'm always hanging out there doing my Instagram stuff. And I will be launching in November. So this is a little bit away. I've also started a course about productivity and helping women be more in tune to themselves. I think like productivity culture is completely a mess and it's not catered
Hot
to
mess.
women at all. Hot mess. And so I teach productivity in like based upon 3, I think, things that we get wrong. So one, there's no space for women. So I teach women to be more in tune to themselves. So the step 1 is about getting clear on who you are and what's important, and then you goal plan. And we don't do that. We just say, well, I want to lose weight or I want to get this project done. We don't think about what's authentic to ourselves and listening to ourselves, listening to our gut. And then the second thing is we plan too far ahead. I feel like 2020 has taught us that like dreams go to die when you think beyond like 90 days. I mean, honestly, that's probably too far out. So it's all about goal planning in whatever season of life that you're in. So again, anchoring back into who you are and what's important, and in short kind of sprints. And so when you put all that together, then we go to like your planner and your calendar, and we do productivity and we figure out how to do time hacks after you've done all that work.
I
And so
love
that
that.
is coming up on November 3rd. I'm going to launch. I'm in the midst of one now, which I'm having a blast doing. But that course, Authentic Productivity, is also going to be coming out November 3rd.
That's amazing. I love that. I have noticed that with a lot of women that I've been working with for coaching, um, and I'm guilty of this too. And this has also been like a great awakening on my end when it comes to productivity, but that there are so many women that are focused on like the wrong type of productivity and they think they need to be accountable for so many different things, but like they're not even accountable for their own self care and self help at all. Like
Yes.
at all. So for me, it's like exactly what you said. Like the culture of productivity is so twisted, right? Of what we've been taught. Like
Yeah.
this is how you need to be productive. Like it needs to be a complete like mind unlearning and mind shift. I love that.
Yes. And definitely getting more authentic with yourself, right? Like we all, both you and I are huge, fans of authenticity. And that's why it's called authentic productivity, because it's like what moves you is then you start inward and then move outward. And trust me, you're going to get everything done you need to get done. Like it's not about saying, well, I can no longer do these things because that's not authentic to me. I can't, feed my kids. No, it's about doing all the things, but getting really clear on what's important to you. And then going out with your goals.
Love
And you
that.
will find you cut things out, you take the guilt out, and then when you do it in such a time period that's really short, you don't feel guilty about saying no, because it's hard for women to say no. And then I talk about boundaries on your productivity, like how to be boundaried. Like, you only are doing this for 90 days. Can you promise yourself enough for 90 days to get this done and to put you first, and to say no to someone and be like, hey, this is the season of business development. So I'm not going to be able to do as much as I've done socially in the past, but I'll be back to you. Give me 90 days and I'll come back, right? It makes people, it frees women up to be more assertive and show up more in their life.
I love that. And as a woman and someone who advocates for women and loves women, we need that.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, like yesterday. I use it for myself. Like,
oh,
2020 was a wake up call for me, and I was sitting in the fetal position about all my dreams going into like air of what I thought I would do in the year. And I was like, yeah, I need to, one, be very clear about my priorities have changed. This is the season for me of doing X, of showing up, being visible in my business so that I can be more present for my parents, right? And for my family and for the people that I love. And so that was just a refocusing of me, that I was like, okay, I need to take these things off my list that have been on the list for like the last year, that maybe are not bad things, but like, what am I doing? Why am I trying to get this all done when that's not even the season of life that I'm in? And so I need to refocus my goals and take things off that are just on the plate because I feel guilty and don't want to say no, right? And try to get all that done in it. So once I started doing that, I was like, oh, wow, look at all these empty holes in my calendar that I can actually show up and do the thing I want to do. So
delegate and
that's
dump that shit, honey. That's what I like to say. Delegate it out, dump it. If it's not serving
yes,
you, I love it in your season, then like, why are you doing it? Right?
yes, exactly. And we're so guilty of that. So that is what that was like my awakening. I'm like, oh, I planned too far ahead. I didn't plan close to me, like really clear about what makes me thrive and what's my values. And like, value-based goal planning is where we need to be, because it forces you to get clear on what's important.
That's amazing. We're already at an hour. I'm like, Kelley, can you come back again on the show?
I'm moving in and co-hosting. What are you talking about, Jenna? Like, I'm just like putting my name on this and being like, yes.
Oh my, actually, that would be really, that, I'm not kidding you right now. That actually would be really fun if we like, if you co-host, that would be awesome.
I'm
I'm
here
not
for
kidding.
it. Like, I totally love this podcast and I love what it stands for. I'm like, I'm moving in and this is like effortless. Talking to you for an hour is like, oh, okay, that was a breeze.
Right? It feels good. I love it. I love your energy and everything that you're doing and your authenticity. Um, Thank you so much. Leading with Your Gut audience, I might have a co-host moving forward. So stay tuned with that. Or if not, then Kelley's going to be on a lot. So if she keeps it real, we
Special
keep
guest.
it real together.
I
um, any last words for audience members? Maybe, or maybe like how folks can really like practice self-care, particularly Black and brown people right now. How can we practice
yeah.
self-care?
I think first it's by just acknowledging that it's okay to give yourself permission to be healing. Like, we've been fighting so long that we don't actually know when it's like, okay, I can just go, I can go heal over here. Like, I can just put pause on this. And that's because it hasn't been really safe for us to do that. But I think first prioritizing that it's okay to heal. It's okay to take time for yourself. And I really do subscribe to, like, Audre Lorde has this famous quote about self-care is not self-indulgence. It's an act of self-preservation and also an act of political warfare, right? And I do feel like the most radical way that we can protest and we can really participate in what's happening right now in 2020 is by taking care of ourselves, is by engaging in meaningful self-care. Take care of your health, take care of your emotions, say them when you feel them, get them out. Take care of your money, like do whatever you need to do to develop yourself economically, because that is what this moment calls us for. And so self-care is the way I protest. It's why I show up. I take care of me so that I survive, and like not only survive, but like do really well in my life, because that is like the middle finger to people who have told you that you're not going to be anywhere. And so I really think like black and brown folks need to do that. Like, take care of yourself and make it a priority. Don't make it on the bottom of the list. Put it on the top. Do one thing today for you, and do the next day do something for yourself as well.
I think we've been taught so long, particularly Black women, we've been taught so long to think that we don't deserve certain things, right? And to like
Yes.
say that out loud and to write that out loud, like I deserve to be protected. I deserve to
Yes.
be supported. I deserve to make that cash, right? Beyonce said best revenge is your paper, right? Like
Yes.
I deserve to be me. I deserve self-care, right?
No, absolutely. And like again, like I would snap again for you saying like, I deserve to be protected. That is so huge that we have not felt safe enough or not felt good enough to say, and I'm worthy. Like there's a whole discussion around our communities right now about worthiness and politics and what we ask for and what we are too scared to ask for because oh my goodness, we got to get crumb. But just in general in life, we've been taught to feel so unworthy by the system and by like history that standing up for yourself and taking care of yourself is radical. It is a protest against people who tell you don't deserve. Yes, you deserve self care the same way you think rich white people indulge in it, which they may or may not be doing, to be fair to them. But you deserve it just as much.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Leading with Your Gut audience, listeners, please go in the show notes and check out Kelley Summit that is coming up in October. I'll be promoting it as well. And Kelley, thanks so much. Till next time, which could be very soon. Co-host, future co-host.
Next week.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you too.